The first step is to create a new project on Firebase. Click on Go to Console and then create a new project. Now give your project a name. I'm typing Google Auth example. I'm switching it off. You can keep it as it is. Now hit continue. For the Google Analytics account, I'm using the default one, and finally hit create project. It seems like Firebase has updated their UI recently. So here I found the authentication feature. Now let's click on Get Started. From here we will select Google, then enable it and select a support mail. Now let's go back to Android Studio and open Firebase from the Tools menu. Here we have an option called Authentication. Now click on this button and it will connect this Android app project with Firebase. It can take a minute or two. Next, click here to add the necessary dependencies for Firebase authentication. Now take a look here. It didn't add the SAC1 fingerprint to Firebase. So we will need to add it manually. If you don't know what it is, just keep watching. I'll cover it at the end. We can also add SHA-256 here. Then download the Google Services.json from here and paste it inside the app folder. We already have this file here, but that's the initial one, so feel free to delete it. So yes, we have successfully implemented Firebase authentication in our Android app. Now it's time to design a simple and practical UI for Google Sign-In. For the login screen, I'm creating a new Kotlin file. The parent component will be a box. Content alignment equals to center. Next, we will add two more composables, one for the logged in state and one for the logged out state. Now create a new class. Let's call it Auth Manager and add context here. Then I'm adding FirebaseAuth by Lazy, FirebaseAuth.getInstant, and also Credential Manager. The concept is actually pretty simple. Using the Credential Manager, we show this pop-up and get the result based on the user's action, whether they cancel or select an account. Then we take the ID token from the selected account and pass it to Firebase using FirebaseAuth. Firebase handles the verification and manages the user session for us. So let's create a method for signing in. We can trigger this pop-up and get its result by simply calling CredentialManager.getCredential. Here we need to pass the context and a credential request. In this credential request, we have to add a Google ID option. Set filter by authorized accounts is set to false, so we don't limit the user to previously authorized accounts. This way they can select any Google account available on the device. Now here's a crucial step. We need to set the server client ID. You can get it from Firebase. We need to make this a suspend fun because getCredential method takes some time to return a result. Using a suspend function lets us wait for the result without freezing the UI. And of course, we want the returned credential from it, which is in a specialized format. But the app will crash if there's an error, so we have to use try-catch. Then we will check whether this credential is valid. From this Android credential, we will create a Google ID token credential. And then we can retrieve the ID token, which is a JSON web token from this. Now wrap this JSON web token into a Firebase credential. And pass this to Firebase by calling signInWithCredential. I know this looks a bit complex, but here's what's happening under the hood. First, using the Credential Manager, we trigger this pop-up and get a credential from the selected account in Android's format, meaning Firebase or most backend services don't directly understand this format. So we check if it's a Google ID token credential. If it is, we extract the JSON web token from it. Now you can use this ID token on your own server or services like Supervase and Firebase to verify the user and manage sessions. But since we are using Firebase, we convert this token into a Firebase credential and pass it to FirebaseAuth, and Firebase handles the rest. Hope that makes sense. So after logging in, we want to get the user's info, right? Like their name, email, and profile picture. For that, let's create a data class to hold this information. I'm naming it user data. The default values will be null. Then I'll create another data class to hold the user data and an error message if anything goes wrong. The same way, all the values will be null. Now this sign-in method will return auth result. If the user is signed in successfully, we will create a user data class and fill the values. Then create a auth result class and pass this user data class. Finally, return this auth result class. After that, we need to return the error messages whenever errors occur. So yeah, this method is complete. The next one will be sign out. It's also gonna be a suspend fun. From FirebaseAuth, sign out, then remove the state from the Credential Manager. But we missed something really important. We need to call a wait here, so the code waits here until the sign-in is actually completed before moving to the next line. Now that our Auth Manager is ready, it's time to call it from the UI layer. So let's create a view model. It will extend Android view model, and we need to pass application as a parameter. For handling UI states, I'm creating another class. Then an enum class where will be the state types. This data class will hold the types and the user data class, and its default value will be null. Inside this view model, we will use a StateFlow here, which we will observe from the UI layer to update the UI. But let's also set the default value of login state type. Now create a method for calling login when the button is clicked. To handle this, we need AuthManager here. Okay, so launch a view model scope here and call signInWithGoogle. It will return the result. Result.error message $.late. This block will be executed when the error message is not null. So if it's not null, stop right here. That's what return @launch does. Then set the login state to error. Now simply set the state to logged in and pass the user data. Which means if the error message is null, this block will not get triggered and the login state will be logged in. After this, create another method for logging out. Launch view model scope, call authManager.signout and update the login state. Now let's come to the UI layer and use the view model as a parameter. But we need to add the Compose view model library. Then collect the login state as a state. From this, we can get the user data and also the error message. I forgot to add the error message here. Let's use when login state.stateType. If the state type is logged in, show the logged in section. Also add the name and email parameters so we can pass that from the view model. Then here comes the one-click listener. Simply call viewModel.logout. Do the same thing for the logged out state. Call viewModel.login when the button is clicked. If an error occurs, I want to show a toast message here. But in order to show a toast, we need context. And let's keep the loading state empty for now. So now let's test it. Yes, the pop-up has shown. Now let's click continue. Well, it is logged in, but I didn't use the name and username parameter there in the text components. So we will fix that. But you also want to show the profile picture, right? In this case, we can use Coil, a library which is used to load images from URLs. Let's paste these dependencies in the build.gradle file. The latest Coil version was conflicting with my project's Kotlin version, so let's downgrade it to 3.0. Now add another parameter here for the profile picture URI. Use an async image loader and load from this URI. Let's pass the URI from the view model. We can simply make it nullable. It's working as expected, but there's a problem. If I close this app after logging in, it will show the logged out screen. But FirebaseAuth manages sessions its own. In the view model, create a method, check for login session, and get the current user from FirebaseAuth. If it's not null, set the login state according to it. Calling FirebaseAuth directly from the view model would be a bad architectural decision. It's better to keep that inside the Auth Manager class. Use a launched effect unit and call viewModel.check for login session. Launched effect runs only once when this screen is first shown, and it won't run again during recomposition unless the key changes. So as you can see, it has changed the state automatically. Don't forget we had a loading state as well. I'm showing a circular progress indicator. Now we need to set this to the state. We can simply set the state to loading at the top of every methods we have in this view model. But there's a bug. For the error state, we are only showing a toast message. That's why there's no login button here. Let's fix it. There's another issue here, and that is if the Firebase user is null, this state is not gonna be updated. It will stay stuck in the loading state. So at the end, set the state to logged out. Well, I made another mistake. We need to return here. So if the Firebase user is not null, anything below this line will not execute. Otherwise, the state will end up as logged out. The packages look a bit messy, right? So let's organize them. First, create a package called FirebaseAuth. Then inside this, create another package called models. This is where we will keep our entities or data classes. Now move the Auth Manager into this package. Next, let's create another package for the view model and one more for the screen. We all know that to generate an APK, we need a JKS file, also known as Java Key Store. And for this app, we have been using the debug key store SHA-1 in Firebase. That means when we run this app in debug mode, like when I click the run button and it generates the APK, everything works fine. But when you create a release build, you'll be using a different key store, right? Like when you are preparing to upload your APK or AAB file to the Play Store. At that point, Firebase authentication won't work anymore. So you also need to add the SHA-1 of that release key store to Firebase. Here you can see I have a JKS file for release builds. Now to get its SHA-1, we can use key tool. Then enter the key store password. Finally, you can add these fingerprints to Firebase. Once you add them, download the Google Services.json file again and replace it here. Even though we already have this file, we still need to replace it because we have just added new fingerprints. And after doing this, everything should work as expected. So that's how you can implement Google Sign-in using Firebase in Android. But if you are building a solid app and your splash screen isn't on point, it can feel a bit dull. I've already made a video on that, you can check it out.